and quick about the painting, and if I go over by a millimeter or two on some edge, it doesn't really matter that much. So the originals are fairly large.
Hi, I'm very curious about your process. The trees I get, they're not going to walk away on you. Maybe it's the weather, the wind may blow a little bit, but a bird that you've never seen before. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the fact that you prefer paintings over photography because the photography sort of freezes that individual bird.
Yeah.
If you had never seen a bird before, how do you go about going from completely unknown to getting it on the oil paint? I mean, what's the process? Got to be very patient.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah.
And do you use photography when you do that?
I don't. Well. I'll get to that. It's a lot of time in the field with the birds. It takes a lot of time just to find them, and then get into a position where you can see it well enough and get a long enough look to be able to really study it. So a lot of my bird sketches, it's just trial and error, long hours in the field watching and doing little quick sketches, and sometimes just sketching a little part of a bird if I only really got a good look or a good study of one part. And then just sort of a long process of studying the birds in the field, working on sketches, going home studying photographs to see what they really look like, going back in the field doing more sketches, back home studying more photos and specimens, and just gradually building up a mental image of what each species looked like. That whole process was really shortened with the trees because it wasn't such a struggle to see them and figure out what was going on. As far as photography, I took a lot of photographs of my own of birds. If I was in a banding station, say, where I could hold the birds in my hand, I would take photographs of details, a spread wing or a close-up of the bill or something like that. I found when I tried to take my own photographs in the field that I'd end up, this was back in the 1980s with film, I'd get pictures back that I didn't even remember taking. I was so, when I was taking the photograph, I was just focused on framing the picture, making sure the exposure was right, getting it focused, and waiting for the right instant to trip the shutter to get the profile view or whatever I wanted. And I really wasn't looking at the bird at all. And it was so much more valuable for me to spend the same amount of time, 5 minutes, or even at that short a time, to spend that time just watching the bird. And even if I didn't actually do a sketch at the end of it, just watching and thinking about the details that I was seeing was more valuable than taking a photograph. So with the birds then, I accumulated a big pile of field sketches and notes and impressions. And then back in the studio, I was able to pull out books and ask my friends for photographs. And so I'd put together all the reference material in the studio and then use photographs along with everything else. But I found that my time in the field was much more useful if I was not distracted by a camera. Yeah.
Thank you. I have one tree question and one bird question.
Okay.
Do trees risk becoming extinct in the same way that animals do, in America particularly?
Yeah. There are a few species of trees that are really threatened, only found in a very small area. There are quite a few species of trees now that are threatened by diseases or introduced insect pests. Eastern hemlock is threatened by the hemlock woolly adelgid that's introduced from Asia. I'm blanking now. The red bay in the southeast is being wiped out by I think it's a fungus called laurel wilt. That it affects all the trees in the laurel family, which includes sassafras and California laurel and some others, and avocado, which is an important commercial plant. What else? There's a disease that's killing a lot of butternut trees, another disease that's affecting beech trees, and then there's the well-known chestnut blight and Dutch elm disease, and another elm necrosis, a new disease that relatively new, that's also killing elm trees. So there are lots of examples of species of trees being threatened by disease or by pests. And there's a lot of effort being put into, in all those cases, being put into trying to find resistant trees. In general, I guess, if you look at the forest as a whole, there's more forest now in the Northeast than there was 100 years ago. Most of what's now forest was farmland 100 years ago. So there's actually more trees and more forest now than there was, but it's a very different mix of species, and all the trees are less than 100 years old. So that's kind of what I was saying about the blurring the line between the natural world and the human world, that there's very little real native forest left, only a few places in the eastern U.S. where you can still see old-growth forest that hasn't been cut. So it's kind of a long answer to your...
Just as a quick follow-up, is there some kind of central repository where all tree seeds are kept in case the worst does happen? Like if sassafras would completely die out or something like that?
Oh, I think there is something like that, but I don't know. But
I think the Smithsonian or something has a seed of everything that's ever grown.
Is there? Yeah. Okay. So we think there is.
One of the things that I appreciate very much is how you show me what to look for, pattern detection especially, which does not come naturally. Do you struggle with finding words? For example, just your words about the aspen, and that was very helpful. The stiff and the slender. Is that a struggle for you? And could you talk about selectivity of words and also pattern detection just a little more? Because it helps me know what to look for.
Yeah. I think words are very important also in this book, and my editors will attest that for me the pictures and the words work together, and as you move the pictures around on the page and move the words to different places, they start to mean different things and emphasize different things. And I always spend a lot of time trying to perfect that, or not to. There's no chance of perfecting it, but to improve that, the way it all works together. I think the pattern recognition is I think that's there's when you look at two birds or two trees or two of anything, you could look at say, just as a simple example, an apple and an orange, and one person could look at them and say they're the same. They're both round. They're both about 4 inches across. They're the same. And another person could look at them and say, no, they're different. They're completely different color. And another person might look at them and say, no, the texture's all different. And another person might look and say, well, there's a different structure. The apple has a stem and a little dimple at the top.